we have a Stone Age brain in the 21st century, but actually we have a mouse brain, we have a monkey brain, we have a lizard brain, we have a worm-like brain. In other words, we're walking around as living museums with hardware inside us whose origins reach back 600 million years.
All right, Rick, it's great to be with you on the FitMind podcast.
Liam, I'm really happy about this. And I just think about the name of your podcast. I mean, fit and a fit mind. I think it's such a great way to think of it. And I also think about the fit between our minds. I'm sure this meaning has not escaped you either. The fit between our minds and the wider world. And it's in that fit that we need to adapt and function and try to be resilient and retain some happiness along the way. So I'm psyched. I'm glad we're doing this.
Yeah, well, that idea for a fit mind actually largely came from your work and reading some of your books, because that's the first time I really got the idea that you could train your mind like a muscle, that you could actually influence how your brain was wiring itself. And this term that I'm not sure if you coined it, but I certainly came across it first in your work of self-directed neuroplasticity. I think that might be a good place for us to start and just kind of talking about what that is and how we can create fit minds.
Oh, thank you. So, well, plasticity means the capacity of something to change, for better or worse. Neuroplasticity is the ways in which our nervous system, especially its headquarters, the brain, can be changed by the experiences we're having, for better or worse. Trauma on the one end, let's say, and regular mindfulness practice, let's say, on the other. And there's growing evidence that we can really influence that change process through simple, deliberate mental activities inside our own minds, kind of simple things, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So in effect, we can shape who we are becoming. And I came up with the phrase self-directed neuroplasticity about 10 years ago, and then in the writing of Buddha's Brain. But then I found that Jeffrey Schwartz, this brilliant scholar at UCLA, a great scientist studying how the brain changes, including in psychotherapy, he had come up with that term first. So I give him pride of place, right? But the bottom line is that we have the power. We have the power to use our minds to change our brains, to change our minds for the better, to help ourselves and everybody else, rippling out into the world. And that's a phenomenal power to claim for ourselves, especially at a time when there's so many externally powerful forces that are pushing us all around.
Yeah, it's really empowering concept, because it places the burden on each of us individually to really sculpt our future minds with how we're applying our attention and awareness. And I think at one point in one of your books, you mentioned that what flows through your mind sculpts your brain, or something along those lines. Could you just explain kind of how that works scientifically?
Yeah. So the kind of cool summary statement from the work of the Canadian psychologist Donald Hebb is that neurons that fire together wire together. So much like with a physical muscle, if you work a particular muscle again and again, you're going to tend to build structure there. In the same way, if you work a part of the brain that does a particular good thing, you're going to gradually build structure there. And as you build structure there, that part of your brain that does that thing, like calm down overreactions to small stuff, let's say, that part of your brain, as it gets as it builds structure there, is going to become more effective. It improves its function. So it's a lot actually like learning anything. If you think about it, learning to walk instead of crawl, or learning how to be more patient with family members, or the politics you see on television or in Facebook these days. Any kind of lasting change of mind must involve a lasting change of brain. That part is not breaking news. It's always been understood that if a person acquires a new skill or develops a new attitude or becomes more of a jerk, let's say, for the worse, something's got to change in the hardware. But what is breaking news is the growing scientific understanding of the mechanisms of that and how pervasive it is and how much power we actually have, many little moments a day, a breath or two at a time actually, to gradually nudge the structure building processes in our own brains in a better direction. Now, if you want, I'll give you a quick little list of some of the mechanisms inside the 3 pounds of tofu-like tissue inside the coconut. All
Be
right.
helpful.
So, right. So neurons that fire together do start wiring together, even over a time span of just minutes. You can see with electron micrographs that the little tiny tendrils are extending toward each other in the neural network inside your head, forming new connections. Second, existing connections called synapses. And in your head are several 100 trillion little microprocessors, these little synapses, each one of them sparkling away, processing information. So existing synapses become more or less sensitive, which is a mechanism of learning broadly, including social emotional learning. Third mechanism, blood flow increases to regions that are busy. Tiny little tendrils, little tiny threads of capillaries start extending into regions that you're working. It's like working that muscle again so that they get more blood flow and therefore they're more effective. A fourth mechanism has to do with epigenetic processes. These are ways in which the genes deep down inside the nuclei of neurons get expressed or suppressed in different kinds of ways. So, for example, people who routinely practice relaxation, you seem fairly chill, just even on brief contact. And I don't know, but there are many ways to practice relaxation deliberately or doing things that are deliberately relaxing. Well, research shows that people that routinely practice deliberate relaxation have improved expression of genes that regulate the stress response. In other words, they get better at kind of calming down, finding their footing, getting centered and strong, and thus being more resilient. Maybe one last mechanism, a fifth one I'll just mention here, and there's some others too, of course. Different regions become better coordinated. So, for example, just a detail, one of the interesting findings consistently around meditation is that even in just around 3 days of practice on, it's like a super short study on the great guinea pigs of social science, college sophomores, just 3 days of some kind of, formal mindfulness practice, a little bit every day, improves the regulation, the coordination in effect between executive regions behind your forehead, in the prefrontal cortex it's called, sort of where if the mind is like a big committee with a lot of unruly members grabbing the mic, the chair of the committee lives right behind the forehead. And with a little mindfulness practice, that chair of the committee behind the forehead gets better at regulating a part of the brain in the middle toward the rear called the posterior, which means rear, cingulate cortex, which fancy term, but that part of the brain matters because it's a key aspect of the default mode network, another fancy term, which is like a giant simulator or ruminator inside our brain, where when we're daydreaming or mind wandering or having negative preoccupations, resenting this person or that person, rehashing conversations, beating ourselves up, the default mode network tends to be active, including its portion, the posterior cingulate cortex. Well, this means that if you improve the coordination between your prefrontal cortex and your cingulate cortex in the rear, and so that the chair of your mental committee in the prefrontal cortex can regulate that part of the brain, can calm it down, can inhibit it more, your mind's going to wander less. You're going to be less caught up in yourself. You're going to be less sucked into loops of negative rumination again and again and again and again, because you've got better control over a part of your brain that does that thing. So there are other mechanisms. I'll finish there, but that's the gist of it. We really can gradually shape ourselves. We're still who we are. I'm still a fairly introverted, determined, stubborn person who loves wilderness. I'll probably always be that way. But I've also helped myself shed a lot of feelings of inadequacy and worries and feelings of worthlessness along the way. And I've helped myself shed a lot of negative reactivity of one kind or another, and hopefully cultivated greater grit, determination, as well as gratitude and compassion and happiness altogether. And I think that's available for all of us.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation. And I think one of the key implications of this, and one of the light bulb moments for me, was realizing that we're training our minds however we apply them, whether it's intentional or not. And the distinction here between this kind of experience dependent neuroplasticity, as I think you call it, where the environment's shaping our minds based on how we're interacting with it. And then the self-directed neuroplasticity piece is more intentional shaping of who do we want to become and how can we start to train those traits. Is that a good way of thinking about it?
It's a fantastic way of thinking about it. Just a technical term alert here. So experience-dependent neuroplasticity is the general process. Then that's a common term in the research literature. I didn't come up with it. And the distinction you're making is wonderful between to realize the brain is always changing. The only question is it for better or worse, and who's in charge?
Right.
That's kind of it. So you bottom-lined it really well there. Exactly right.
So now, what role does evolution play in all this? Because one of the explanations you give for the reason that we have to train our minds is that it does come with a lot of evolutionary software that's pre-programmed on it and a lot of tendencies that might not be so helpful in the modern world.
Well, that's a great framing. So we have a Stone Age brain in the 21st century, but actually we have a mouse brain, we have a monkey brain, we have a lizard brain, we have a worm-like brain. In other words, we're walking around as living museums with hardware inside us whose origins reach back 600 million years. That's a fact. And to me, it's humbling and gratitude inspiring and responsibility inducing to recognize this. And so we have a nervous system and other parts of our body that were shaped in the hot forge of evolution. Brutal, tough. Most animals die while they're being eaten by other animals, including our own ancestors. The human species itself, anatomically modern humans, are 300,000 years old. That's a long time. Just think about your own lifespan, kind of maxing out maybe at 100 years if you're really unusual and fortunate. Okay, and then string together, 30,000 of those? 3,000 of them. 3,000 generations, 3,000 lifespans. The human species has walked this earth. You know, I look out in my backyard. I live in Northern California, north of San Francisco, smoky air today. And I know that the Miwok people, the native people, are walking through my backyard, which kind of sits in a little suburban area on the edge of open space into the hills. That's a watershed. You know they were walking through my backyard 3,000, 10,000 years ago. Wow, we've been here a long time. So in that context of long time, right, we have tool manufacturing hominid ancestors who began making tools 2.5 million years ago. People were using fire 1 million years ago with brains roughly half our size. And then you just extend further back. Okay, so all that, we've been really shaped. One of the ways in which we're walking around with the effects of that evolution is with what scientists call the negativity bias of the brain, in which, as I put it, we've got a brain that's like Velcro for bad experiences, but Teflon for good ones. And we have a brain that, for raw survival purposes, back in the Stone Age, back in Jurassic Park, we've got a brain that automatically does 5 things. Scans for bad news, over-focuses upon it, overreacts to it, overlearns from it, and becomes gradually sensitized to the negative over time. So we're all familiar with many examples of that. You know, you have a partner or coworker or something happening. 10 things happen in your day. 9 are good, 1 is bad. What do you think about, or what lands hard? Research shows that in couples relationships, that negative interactions have much more impact than positive ones. So to have a good long-term relationship, including a marriage, let's say, or such as a marriage, you need to make sure that your positive interactions, including from the perspective of the other person, vastly outnumber the negative ones, 3-to-1, 5-to-1, even more than that. So that's really powerful. And another thing is to realize that we've got a brain that's designed to become gradually more sensitive to stress, gradually more irritable in the face of irritants. We become sensitized to the negative, and we then become hyperacute learners of negative because we become sensitized to it. And so to me, one of the points of taking in the good routinely is to become more sensitive to the positive, to develop a greater capacity to learn from ordinary, authentic, beneficial experiences. So your brain becomes more like a really receptive sponge for little moments throughout your day when you're feeling grateful or strong or learning a new thing or calmer or happier. And that's one of the great opportunities, I think. So I'll bottom line it. For me, deal with the bad, for sure. And if you've got to get stressed out to deal with it, pull your kid away from a bus, run out of a burning building, speak truth to power, do it. Deal with the bad. And second, turn to the good. Not to bypass the bad, not to suppress it. I don't believe in positive thinking. I believe in realistic thinking. Turn to the good, though. What's also true? Beware that tendency in which your brain is controlling you. Mother Nature, the Stone Age brain is controlling you if it sucks you into the negative and forces you to lose perspective on the bigger picture. Go wide. See what else is going on. The stuff that is working, the kids that are laughing, the technology that's functioning, the scientists that are working on cures for COVID, the good people trying to help other people vote, however they vote. Just vote at all, right? The goodness in your own heart, your own inner strength, your own lovingness, your own, without needing to be a saint, fundamental decency inside you. Recognize what is also good. So deal with the bad, turn to the good. And third, take in the good. Really help it sink in so that you don't waste it on your brain, so that this good experience doesn't just wash through you like water through a sieve. Take in the good. Slow down. Receive it into yourself. Feel it in your body. Focus on what feels good about it. Let yourself budge. Let yourself shift into a slightly new way of being that's a little bit better, a little more skillful, a little happier, a little more patient than that other way of being. And that's the gist for me. Deal with the bad, turn to the good, take in the good.
Yeah, I think we can all relate to that example of, you receive a couple of compliments in a day. It could even be 10 compliments, 10 nice things people said to you. And if there's one insult you receive, that's what your brain naturally focuses on. And then you have the news cycle seems to be taking advantage of this because they know our brains like that negativity and get fired up by it. And it's more emotional.
If it bleeds, it leads. Do you know that saying? If it bleeds,
right.
It leads. Yeah.
That's right. And you've got some really good practices in your book, Hardwiring Happiness, for doing what you just suggested, which is really learning to focus on the positive so your brain starts paying more attention to it. And that becomes what you start to focus on more naturally. And so I was wondering if you could briefly walk us through this HEAL HEAL process.
Oh, that's really great. So if you think about it, we go to school, right? And we learn all these things, but we're not really taught how to learn. And if you think about it, we have all these various inner strengths of one kind or another. I think learning is the strength of strengths. It's the superpower of superpowers. Because if you're good at learning, and I mean learning now, not just school learning, mainly I mean social, emotional, somatic, attitudinal, spiritual learning, including spiritual learning, let's say, if that's meaningful to a person, that kind of learning is the process by which we develop and heal and grow and become more skillful and capable every day. Learning is the basis of self-reliance. If we are to be independent, autonomous, self-reliant people in a challenging world, we need to get good at learning. What we're talking about here could be understood as some sort of optional luxury item, la-di-da, for a bunch of rich yuppies at yoga camp. It's totally not true. The more your life is hard, the more people are kicking you in the teeth, the more you're dealing with systemic systems of prejudice, discrimination, and oppression, the worse it is, the more important it is to be self-reliant. And the heart of that is to get good at learning, helping yourself grow a little, heal a little, change a little for the better every day. So what I've done is develop a fundamental model of how we can help that learning process occur in our own space. I didn't invent many of the little neuropsychological methods in it. You can find them spread out all over the place, in how kindergarten teachers are taught to be effective with their kids, how scientists train worms to turn left at a junction rather than right, because left is where the sweet water is, and on the right side is icky vinegar. So the HEAL acronym stands for Have, Enrich, Absorb, and Link. And have just means have a beneficial experience, usually because you're already having it. There you are. You're just like, I feel good having this conversation. We're kind of on the same page, right? We've never met before doing this, and there's a natural rapport here. It's not more than what it is, but it's not less than what it is. Why not notice it? Or one could deliberately create a beneficial experience. Call up a feeling of inner strength to deal with somebody you got to assert yourself with. Or remind yourself why you need to exercise, or not eat so many cookies, or not drink so many beers. You can call up an experience for yourself. Either way you have it, those neurons are now firing together. That song is playing in the inner iPod. You're having a beneficial experience. And then, to learn from it, though, involves two aspects I call enriching and absorbing. And this is how you can help yourself. You can enrich the experience to help it have lasting impact. In other words, the whole point is to change your brain, to leave lasting physical change behind in neural structure or function. How do you actually do that? Well, so in enriching, I'll just go through the list really fast. There are 5 ways you can help yourself get more out of the experiences you're having. So let's say you're, just feeling kind of good about yourself. You got something done, or somebody's complimented you, it's nice. Or maybe you're with your partner. You realize, like with my wife, it's going to go better if I act like this next time. And you want to let that really sink in, all right? So you're having the experience. So 5 factors of enriching. 1, duration. Stay with the experience for a breath or longer. The longer the neurons are firing together, the more they're going to wire together. Second factor of enriching, intensity. The more intense you make that experience, the more it's going to tend to sink in. So kind of turn up the volume on feeling really grateful, or really compassionate, or really committed to your exercise program. Third factor, I call multi-modality. It's a fancy way of saying the more aspects of experiencing you bring to bear, the more it's going to sink in. So bring to bear thoughts. What are your thoughts related to that experience of compassion or self-worth? Bring to bear sensations or perceptions. What are you recognizing? What are you feeling in your body? Third factor, emotion, or third aspect of experience is emotion. What's it feel like? Not just the idea. A lot of people do gratitude practice. They'll have ideas of what they're grateful for, but they won't feel anything. And then also, what are the desires? Desire is an aspect. What do you want? What do you wish? What do you long for? What are your intentions? What are your values? What are the highest aspirations of your heart? Those are all different aspects of the desire component of experience. And then last, actions. How do you move your body when you feel a little stronger, when you feel a little more determined or confident or caring? What's that expression in your face when you're more caring? These are all different things, and I'm still with multimodality. And then fourth factor of enriching is personal relevance. Why does it matter to me? What's it got to do with me? And so the more that if you really want to help an experience sink in, focus on why it is good for you to shift a little bit in this direction, to take this into yourself, maybe even to heal something inside or fill some hole in your heart. Salience, that's a fourth factor. And you don't need to do them all. Any one of them is useful, but I'm systematically going through, all right, you want to know how to take on board the superpower of learning? This is it. And then fifth factor of enriching is novelty. The more that an experience seems fresh or new, the more we regard it with beginner's mind, child mind, don't know mind, the more we're going to grow from it. And, there we are, let's say trying to help ourselves feel a little more, self-worth, and like, I got that done today. Whatever, boring. It's not going to sink in. But, I got that thing done today, and wait a minute, I want to come to it as if it's the first day of my life, with a sense of freshness and not knowing, and resting in the emergent edge of now continually, receiving the new as it passes through. Basically, what enriching means is make the experience big. Absorbing means make your brain really good at internalizing that experience. So if you intend to receive an experience into yourself, you're more likely to do that. If you sense it sinking into your body, it's going to become part of you. And also, if you focus on what's rewarding about it, what's enjoyable or meaningful about it, that's going to increase dopamine and norepinephrine activity in your brain, which is going to flag the experience as a keeper for long-term storage. So super fast, I've listed 8 things you can do inside your mind. Any one of them are good. The more you do, the better. Duration, extend the experience. Intensity, help it be more intense. Multi-modality, help it be a very full and rich experience. Salience, help it be personally relevant. Novelty, help yourself recognize what's fresh or new about it. Intention, intend to receive it into yourself. Sense it coming into you and focus on what feels good about it. That's the essence of the process. It sounds complicated, but we all know how to do it. We just keep skipping it. It's like a fire. I think of these 3 steps I've named: HEA, have, enrich, absorb. In terms of a fire, have fire. Have a beneficial experience. Often noticing you already have it. Second, enrich it. Don't just walk away from the fire. Put more logs on it, right? Don't let anybody rain on your parade. Stay with it, right? That's enriching. And then absorb. Receive the warmth of the fire into yourself. And then if you want, optionally, L stands for link, in which you hold 2 things in your mind at once, positive and negative. Make the positive bigger, such as a big experience of feeling like a decent, good, lovable person. Have that be big in your mind. And off to the side, let's say, in my example here, are old experiences of feeling small and worthless, like a loser and inadequate, unwanted. And since neurons that fire together wire together, if you do this linking step in the way I've described, the positive will associate with the negative and put it in context, compensate for it, soothe it, ease it, and even eventually replace it. That's the fundamental process. If I were to summarize it in 4 words, it would be have it, enjoy it. Have the experience, but especially enjoy it. Don't forget the second necessary stage of learning, internalization. Or if I were to summarize it in 2 words, mo better. Mo better. In other words, more episodes of beneficial experience, and then more depth of engagement with them while you're having them.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, our minds, when you get something that's pleasurable, the mind is so prone to just start thinking immediately about what it wants next. And I guess as you talk about in your books, our ancestors were not the ones who were easily satisfied and just kind of sitting around happy-go-lucky. They were kind of the skittery ones who were always looking for the next potential threat. And another area of, other than the negativity bias that we just went over, another area of evolution that you've talked about is this idea that there's a good wolf in us, like positive tendencies like in-group love and collaboration and motherly love. And then there's also this kind of bad wolf, all these negative tendencies for out-group exclusion and hatred and greed. And so there is kind of this, even on some level, I mean, it makes sense that this is a recurring kind of archetype over time in all the major religious traditions and whatnot. But this battle of good and evil is being waged inside us just on a biological level between our different tendencies. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that there was individual selection and evolution happening on one level, and we wanted our personal interests, we wanted to survive, but then there was also group selection on another level. So maybe you could help parse that out for the listeners.
Well, you had a super summary. I'll just build on what you said there, Liam. So until just 10,000 years ago, our human ancestors and then their hominid ancestors, close relatives, lived their lives in small bands with 40 or 50 people. Maybe loosely associated in a friendly way with some other bands, but very often competing in brutal, tough ways with other bands, competing for scarce resources. So the current life in which we, have several million people living cheek by jowl in a city, that's completely unusual, completely strange. So what enabled our ancestors to survive was getting really good at two kinds of things that had to do with group living. One, bands that were better at cooperating internally were more likely to support individual passing on genes that passed on genes, evolution, as you said, at the individual level, and also bands that bred mainly internally, that were better at cooperating with each other. They were more able to do empathy or bonding or love or cooperative planning or use language in ways that brought them together, bring together things like music or who knows what, religious activities that promoted group cohesion. Bands that were better at that could outcompete other bands. It's also true that bands that were better at dehumanizing the other, at hating them, at fearing them, at being cruel to them, at being vicious and violent toward the other, frankly, kill the men, take the women, take the kids, move on. That story has been played out so often, and obviously we saw it as well in things like Game of Thrones. So we have inside us, co-evolving, metaphorically speaking, the wolf of hate and the wolf of love. I think the wolf of love is much stronger because our ancestors spent much more time inside their bands than fighting or fleeing from other bands. But still, all around us, you can see the terrible effects of the unleashed wolf of hate. So to me, the takeaway is to accept the wolf of hate or the wolf pack, of aggression and anger and intensity and fieriness, and to accept it and to draw upon it to the extent necessary, but be very careful about it, because that wolf of hate is very prone to poke its head up and start looking for someone to bite as soon as we start to feel that our group is mistreated by them. Right? And we're very vulnerable to the appeals of various authoritarian demagogues throughout history who tell us about how they are mistreating us. They have betrayed us. They are getting all the good stuff. They're not human. They're not real people. They're not like us. They're lesser. And we're very vulnerable to those appeals. So we need to be very careful about not being swayed by them and to see through them. Deal with real adversaries. Deal with real adversaries as you need to, but to be very careful about the siren song of made-up grievances, and resentment, and sticking it to those other people. That's really bad for us. And it's really important for us to appreciate that in an interdependent world, there's just one human tribe now, just one human tribe. 7.5 billion or so in a rapidly warming planet, running out of important resources like water. And we need to work together. We need to cooperate. We need to see everyone. We need to expand the circle of us to include all of them.
Right. That bad wolf software is no longer useful. And I mean, unless you're playing on a sports team or something. I mean, sports, I guess, is one kind of beautiful manifestation of that. But then there's also all this buggy software that gives us the tendency to discriminate, for example, which I was reading. One of the reasons that we have this kind of even at a subconscious level, we start to, someone who looks different or who acts different, we start to think that they might carry our groups, our tribal groups wanted to avoid outsiders in part because they might carry harmful pathogens and as well as compete for resources. So we have to be on the lookout for that. And even when we look at history and we can easily say, oh, those people were awful and I never would have behaved like that, that software is still in us somewhere. And so we have to be on very careful alert for it. And it occurs to me that we all have to kind of do this work of consciously doing the self-directed neuroplasticity to overcome those tendencies.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that. And paradoxically, I think it really helps to claim your power. And I think about different people, public figures, let's say in America. Let's think about John Lewis and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and both of whom fought really hard, for different kinds of civil rights for people of color and also for women, let's say. they were tough. They were fierce. I think about our founding fathers. I think about George Washington, Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson. They were tough. They beat off the greatest military power in the world, Great Britain, in the American Revolution. And yet, they did not let themselves be poisoned and corrupted by hatred and demagoguery. And I think of the Dalai Lama, another current example, dealing with his adversary, the Chinese government. And he makes it very clear that that government is his adversary. They are currently, as we talk right now, doing terrible things in Tibet to the Tibetan people, peaceful, nonviolent Buddhist people trying to live their lives. So even people like the Dalai Lama or John Lewis or Ruth Bader Ginsburg were able to be strong. And if you can be strong toward your adversaries and fearless in a certain sense, you take into account what they can do to you. You're not stupid, but you're fundamentally clear-eyed about what you see and what you value and what you plan. You hold on to that clarity in your innermost being. When you can do that, and I think that's very important these days, when you can do that, then you don't have to get caught up in hatred. You don't need to get preoccupied with helpless outrage. You see what you see. What's Maya Angelou saying? When people show you who they are, believe them the first time. And I think it's very important, frankly, in terms of dealing with the major threats right now, which is a disruption of truth-telling, which is the core of any kind of mental health or group health or anything. Truth-telling and fair play, in our political life. That's being attacked by, and aided and abetted by mechanisms like Facebook, which are itself neutral, but whose algorithms can be immediately co-opted by evil actors who just want to disrupt the cohesion that can bring a country together and help it stay connected. So to me, it's really important to be tough and strong about that and clear-eyed and not weak and to have the moral courage to stand up. But when you have that kind of courage, you don't need to get all cruel and horrible and dehumanizing toward them. And to me, you retain a fundamental freedom in your own heart to speak truth to power, to be fiery as appropriate, without letting yourself be corrupted by hatred.
So I want to shift gears slightly here and talk about some of the work in your most recent book, Neurodharma, and more like what are the heights of human potential in terms of the mind. And I don't know, maybe you could start by just defining that term Neurodharma for us and kind of what this angle is all about.
Oh yeah, great. So basically, what Neurodharma is the intersection of two ways of knowing ourselves. We can know ourselves objectively from the outside in. That's the neuro. We can also know ourselves subjectively in our experience from the inside out through both psychology and perennial wisdom. The perennial wisdom of the ages around the entire world of people who've done the deepest possible dive into their own minds, sometimes called the Olympic athletes of mental training. So Neurodharma is where these two ways of knowing ourselves meet. And what I did in the book, which is a culmination book for me, it is really cool. It's really hardcore. And it's accessible for beginners, but I think it's especially available, especially useful for someone who has just a little bit of inner practice, at least under their belt of one kind or another, who's really interested in going all the way. So what the book's about is developing 7 qualities inside yourself that, when perfected, to me, constitute awakening, full awakening, and enlightenment. I'm not there yet myself, but I'm, heading as best I can each day up the mountaintop in that direction. So what are these 7 qualities? The way I talk about them is a little poetic, and I talk about them as practices. We develop them by practicing them. What you practice grows stronger. So steadying the mind, developing a fundamental stability of present moment awareness, including the depths of it in deep, deep, deep meditative concentration. Second, warming the heart, bringing your heart to bear. Heartfeltness, courage, open-heartedness, kindness, love, compassion for yourself, compassion for others, warming the heart. And third, I call it resting in fullness, by which I mean equanimity, emotional balance, little basis for craving, little basis for drivenness or aversion or grasping or clinging, because you feel full already. You feel rested in an underlying sense of peacefulness, contentment, and love, so that you become much more resilient and much less agitated by the waves of the world landing upon you. So those three qualities together, you can imagine, and pick your person who for you is an exemplar of a very high level of human development, very high level of human potential. Pick your person, you see immediately, oh yeah, they're solid, they're present, their minds are steady, they're not distracted all the time, they're not chasing one shiny object after another, like you said earlier. They're loving, their hearts are open, even when they deal with their adversaries. And there's tremendous kind of inner calm and stability and a sense of contentment deep down inside themselves, even when life is challenging. So those are those three, the first three: steadiness, lovingness, and fullness. And what I do in the book, and with each one of these 7 qualities, is go into the underlying brain science, the coolest, latest neuroscience about how can you really develop the circuitry that underlies steadiness, lovingness, and fullness. All right. Then the next 3 also cluster together. The next 3 of the 7, wholeness is the 4th quality, a sense of feeling whole, nothing left out, not divided internally, feeling undivided, feeling complete as you are, rested in a sense of beingness with your mind as a whole, your consciousness as a whole, in which different kinds of doing can occur. So you see that as well in these people. There's a sense of they accept themselves fully, their minds are wide, their minds are spacious, their minds are open and wholeness. 5th quality, nowness, developing the capacity to really be here now, in the present, radically and continuously, getting as close as you can experientially to the emergent edge of now as it passes through you. And again, you see this fully developed in people who are very, very far along. They're completely in the present. And as the Buddha said a long time ago, their expressions are serene because they're in the present. They're really close to the present moment as it disappears beneath their feet. And living in the freshness, the emergence of the present moment before the qualities of selfing, me, myself, and I, my precious, have time to sink in. They're on to the next thing before they've had time to get neurotic about the last thing, right? Nowness. And how do you actually do that in the brain? Very cool stuff. And then the 6th quality, I call it poetically opening into allness. It's that sense of being one with everything. You know, if you're clear, there's a distinction. There's Liam over there. There's Rick over here. The hand is not the cup it holds. Okay, fine. But bigger than that, when you're opening into allness, as I put it, you have the boundaries between self and world start softening. You start having more and more of what, a non-dual experiences of everything altogether as one vast integrated process of which you are a local ripple, a local expression. I call it you are a local eddy in the stream, patterning allness as you go. And that feels great. You feel less isolated, less separated, less beleaguered. You feel more buoyed, more supported, more connected. Really beautiful stuff. And also in the book, I talk about, extreme versions of that oneness, these radical, unusual, but actually quite common. About a third of the people in the world report experiences like this, with or without psychedelics, usually without, in fact, in which the sense of self suddenly drops away and the sense of the world shines forth with radiant perfection. Whew. What in the world is going on in the brain when that happens? And what can we learn from that for everyday life to soften the boundaries between self and world, allness? And then last, finding timelessness. This is where I really go after the pinnacle, really, the ultimate, where we can explore amidst the continual changes of our own experiences, what is still? What is the stillness, the spaciousness, the unchangingness inside us? What could be called unconditioned. Conditioned experiences come and go. What is relatively unconditioned, through which experiences pass, like awareness? And then ultimately, what might be transcendentally unconditioned, meaningfully distinct from the ordinary conditioned Big Bang universe? So many mystics, saints, and sages have pointed to that. I'm not trying to persuade someone to that in the book. I'm just exploring the sense of what's possible. A sense of unconditioned possibility, always just prior to conditioned actuality. Maybe a sense of consciousness, necessarily woven into the fabric of the universe, so that quantum possibility can become actuality, right, at the emergent edge of now. A sense of inner freedom, so that people, in my experience of people who are very, very far along in their practice of any tradition, Jewish, Hindu, Muslim, Sufi, First People, indigenous people around the world, secular, Christian, whatever, people who are really far along, you sense that a light shines through them that's not entirely their own, right? And as we develop ourselves in this way, we start to become increasingly porous or permeable to the absolute, to the infinite, to the eternal, to what is timeless, because it's not changing, it's not conditioned, thus timeless. And we start to feel more like, almost as if the front of our being is receiving or entering into the emergent phenomena of the ordinary universe, while the back of us, in effect, is resting in timelessness continuously. So that's what the book's about. It's not a religious book. It's very practical. It's super pragmatic. It's incredibly well referenced. It's very experiential. It's full of practices. People can check it out. They might want to listen to it, because I read the book in the audio version and take people through many, many guided meditations. They also might want to really check out, I highly recommend it, my online Neurodharma program, which is based on a 10-day meditation retreat I taught, grounded in this material. And we've turned it into a very well-organized video program that's a great companion to the book. And people can learn about the book, and they can learn about that online program at my website, rickhanson.net. And I should say that the program itself is very affordable. It's really inexpensive considering how much is in it. And of course, we have scholarships for people with genuine financial need.
That's great. And this really excites me too, is like, what is the mind fully capable of? And I like how you said across different cultures, like there have been these systems developed for training the mind in a lot of different traditions, not just Buddhism, but Hinduism and the Christian mystics and all these different traditions, where then people are reporting almost these psychological phenomenon that are similar, and they kind of frame it in the context of their belief system. But it seems like they're all kind of pointing to the same experiences and kind of following some kind of similar map. And I guess the listeners, when they hear you talk about mental Olympians, might be curious to hear about some of those studies that show that these are actually mental Olympians, and might bring some kind of healthy skepticism, like what, sure, these people are reporting these things, but have they just kind of gone mad? Like, how do we know what's going on in the brain there that shows that their practice has paid off?
Yeah. Well, the proof of the pudding is what a person is experiencing regularly, kind of what their basic mood is, and also how they are, especially when they're pressed and challenged. And if we recognize in ourselves that we are developing in ways that can feel increasingly profound, our brains must be changing. Or if we're in the presence of beings who are really impressive, really developed, well, obviously something had to change in their brains as well. Just think of it in sports. Michael Jordan, we watched the TV series, really deeply interesting, about the last season he was on in the Chicago Bulls. And clearly he's a guy who trained himself incredibly well. And came in with incredible talent, and then he trained the heck out of it. And so you see the results. So if you're seeing extraordinary results on the court or in the kitchen, when the oatmeal starts to fly, that those extraordinary results must reflect underlying changes in the brain, just period. Now, that said, two findings really come forward for me as examples. One is that when people with 10, 20, 30,000 years of meditation, 20,000 hours of meditation background, let's say, when they know they're going to get an electrical shock in an experiment, it won't kill them, but it's unpleasant. Normal people, regular people, when they know the shock is coming, parts of their brain start getting really agitated. It's going to hurt. I don't like it. These people with these 30,000 hours of meditation, they're super chill. They're like, no shock now, no shock now, no shock now. Why borrow trouble? Why fear the future? They're so in right here. They're totally in the present. I'm in the present. The present's fine. Don't know. The present's fine. I'm doing okay, right? And then they get shocked. All right. So they notice they get shocked. The brain of the Buddha is still going to react if a brick drops on his foot, right? So they don't like it. But then, whoop, they recover back to baseline really fast. So compared to untrained people, people with this kind of training around a well-controlled experiment like getting a pain, don't fear it before it comes. They don't get all caught up in it before it comes. And after it passes, they let it go. They let it go. They don't keep obsessing, oh, I might get shocked again. They just let it go. That's pretty wild, right? And you can think of immediate applications of that kind of very specific, well-controlled neurological experience inside an MRI scanner, that costs lots and lots of money, how that applies to everyday life. Another example is that people who have lots and lots of practice have much more gamma range brainwave activity. The gamma range is synchronized firing of millions, maybe billions of neurons together 30 to 100 times a second. So that's tremendously synchronized. And that quality of tremendous gamma range synchronization is associated with more rapid learning. Because for neurons to wire together, they have to fire together within a few milliseconds. Well, if you're getting a lot of synchronized firing together, you're going to be more likely to get a really exact firing together within a few milliseconds if your brain is already doing a lot of synchronized firing 100 times a second, if you think about it. Also, that sense of gamma range activity that is spread throughout the entire brain is probably also associated with a feeling of personal integration and wholeness and feeling whole as you are, which really, rings true for me in my own background with meditation. You have this growing sense of just what's called singleness of mind or unification of consciousness. The mind as a whole, in the broadest sense, consciousness as a whole, is just unfolding, and it's okay with all these little elements within it, little experiences that here and there that are parts of the stream of consciousness, little parts of the mind, unfolding, self-occurring and self-liberating along the way. So you get less and less attached to that whole process. So those are two major findings. That I think are, examples of the benefits of long-term mental training.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating. And I'm sure that folks who want to read more into this will check out Neurodharma. And I know we're coming up on the top of the hour here. Do you have a couple of time for a few rapid fire questions?
I love them. Bring it. And I'll give you some rapid fire answers rather than my kind of super complete answers.
Okay. So the first question is, what's your favorite meditation style or practice?
Oh, okay. Well, I've been meditating since 1974 in lots of different kinds of ways, and people sort of evolve in their practice as they grow, and There's a wonderful saying from Milarepa, the Tibetan sage, who described his life of practice. He said that in the beginning, nothing came. In the middle, nothing stayed. In the end, nothing left. And so with practice, you become increasingly able to just drop into the traits that you've cultivated, right, from states that were not yet stable. So myself, I really try to, how can I put it, rest my mind upon what draws my heart. And what I mean by that is to open into and stabilize being where I'm going in my own practice, which is to feel just profoundly open and present and unidentified with anything going through the mind and abiding as consciousness, feeling as a local expression or a local patterning of all that is. So that might sound very fancy, but that's what I aim after. And then I get distracted. I think about my shopping list or my email, and I go, oh, and then I go back into it again. It's sort of like, if the mind is like a pond, we tend to be preoccupied from moment to moment with these little waves moving through it, and that's okay. But increasingly with meditation, you abide as the pond as a whole, and that feels pretty great.
Yeah, well, I like how that's not something that, is just applicable to the cushion. It's like an everyday practice of collapsing into self and then recognizing and coming back into this more optimal way of being, recognizing the whole, collapsing. It seems like something that's can be done in any moment. So another question is, what's the most promising research that you're interested in right now?
Well, I think a whole chunk of work that's really neat has to do with the power of a wider view, widening your perspective. And there's a lot of research that shows that when we're negatively preoccupied, we tend to move into tunnel vision. We fixate on that one light in the inner dashboard that's flashing red. And we lose sight of the larger context, including all kinds of other things that are not red, that are actually going okay. So there's research there. There's also research that neurologically, when you go out into the sense of things as a whole, including if you do it visually, like moving your gaze out to the horizon line, there are different ways to do this. So I'll talk about, experiencing your body as a whole while you breathe, let's say, or while you walk, your whole body rather than just one part of it after another. Or you can get a sense of the room as a whole, or you can get a sense of a panoramic bird's eye view. As soon as you move out into the whole, many good things happen neurologically in terms of coming into the present, reducing inner chatter inside your head that's, murmuring away, muttering away all the time, taking life less personally, and feeling less threatened and put upon. So there's a lot of research about going out into the sense of the whole, widening your view that I think is really promising. And for me, that's one of my core practices. It's slow down, take a breath, widen your view. Just that right there is so helpful, even over just a few seconds. Slow it down, take a breath, widen your view.
That's really cool. Yeah, I actually just came off of a Maha Mudra retreat where one of the practices we did was becoming aware of awareness and then noticing that the mind constructs kind of artificial boundaries to that awareness, which might be the edge of your visual field or whatever, and then just kind of pouring awareness into those boundaries and noticing that it can just keep going in all directions until it just goes wider and wider and wider.
That's wonderful. And what you just said there, Liam, relates to something you said earlier, which is there's only one human brain, basically. There are many different traditions, but you start seeing the same thing here, there, and everywhere. And the kind of way I think of it, because I'm a longtime rock climber, wilderness person, if awakening is like a mountain that we progress up from the dusty plains of neurosis, up into the lower meadows, we're starting to get a little more chill and happy, all the way up to the pinnacle that, let's say, defines the absolute upper reaches of human potential. Well, there are many routes up that mountain of awakening. You have the Mahamudra route. Within Tibetan Buddhism, there are different routes. Then you have the Dzogchen route, the Vajrayana route, say. And then you have the Christian route, the secular route, and the human potential route, and the Tony Robbins route. And, okay, great. You have all these different routes up the mountain. Fine. But on each one of those routes, again and again, you find the same 7 moves, the same 7 steps. Steadiness, lovingness, fullness, wholeness, nowness, allness, timelessness. Again and again and again and again and again. And to me, it doesn't really matter which route you take. Take some kind of route and take the step in front of you, right? If it's a path with heart, you don't need to know for sure, how far you're going to go. You just need to know that it's worth taking the next step and then the step after that. So yeah, that's great.
Right. Wonderful. Okay, a couple more of these. If you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be?
Well, the Buddha.
I thought so.
Amazing. Yeah, Jesus, that would be amazing. Leonardo da Vinci, that'd be amazing. I'll just leave it there. Those would be pretty great.
3 good picks. Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be a fascinating conversation. Wonder what they would say about our current times.
Yeah.
It's one thing to think about.
Yeah.
What's something you believe that most people would disagree with?
That most people would disagree with. Wow. Disagree with. This is a cool question.
Yeah. It comes from Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel has a book. I'm forgetting the name of it, but he said that he asks everyone that in an interview before he hires them. And so I kind of stole it from him.
Wow, I'm going to reflect on that. How about toss me the next one while I kind of mull this one?
Yeah. It's a tough one. Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's great.
Okay, so the other one is you have a 15-second commercial that goes out to the entire world, and what would your message be?
Well, it would be basically deal with the bad, turn to the good, take in the good, in a nutshell, and claim the power you have to grow a little every day and realize that it's your responsibility. No one can do it for you. To me, it's a really tough-minded, honest take on things. No one can grow for you. On the other hand, no one can defeat you. And to claim that kind of moxie to help yourself every day. Bingo.
Lovely. Do you want to end there? I can also just edit out that other question if you don't want to, if nothing's coming to mind right now.
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, I don't know if there is anything. And I'm frankly, I'm not sure I'd hire someone who was convinced that they knew something that most people disagreed with. Because
I think maybe I could reframe it. It doesn't have to be, I mean, it could be something that a lot of people could be uninformed about it. I feel like a lot of your work is, most people wouldn't understand it until they've read it. Like most people might not understand that they can train their mind. So it could be something like that. It doesn't have to be like a strong opinion you have where you're saying like, I'm right and everyone else is wrong about this like controversial subject, I guess.
I'd like to say this, which is there is definitely something that I believe is incredibly important. It's an absolute first principle. It's foundational. With it, there's hope. Without it, there's no hope. And this thing, which I'll name in a moment, is almost never talked about. It's almost never addressed. It's blown right by again and again. It's obscured in all kinds of ways. So I think it's something that it's not so much that people disagree with it, it's that they don't recognize its profound importance. And that is the fundamental principle of telling the truth and playing fair as the basis for our politics and any kind of community life. If we don't seriously fight for that principle and confront people who violate it routinely, we're never going to get out of this mess. And we're just going to perpetuate the Game of Thrones rule of authoritarian elites that we've seen over the last 10,000 years. We have to fight for truth-telling and confront people immediately and disqualify them for public life if they're clearly committed to lying or disinformation or gaslighting or other things that make it impossible to discern the truth. Or if they attack truth tellers, it's fake news, or they attack scientists who are trying to figure out what's true, or journalists. If they're casual about the brutal murder of journalists like Khashoggi, boom, instant DQ. So that's one thing I think is really true. And you can see routinely is that you have someone who's, you watch on TV or you see debates, you just sit around a dinner table, you've got someone who's actually interested in what are the facts, and then, some kind of reasonable problem solving about dealing with the facts. And then you see another person who has no interest in facts. They're deeply committed, they're caught up in a cult, they believe what they believe, they're not interested in any evidence that would contradict it, and they attack the process of fact-finding and truth-telling. And then what you see is the first person doesn't actually call that out directly. The first person chases one bizarre charge or statement or made a piece of BS after another, which plays into the game of the second person who wants to disrupt truth-telling and fact-finding, right? And so to me, that's the one thing I think that I would really assert, the absolute vital importance of that, and the need to punish freeloaders. What enabled our ancestors to develop altruism was the punishment of freeloaders. Because if there's no punishment for freeloading, then it creates a survival cost for someone to be altruistic, to share their food with another person. In other words, if I'm altruistic with you today and give you my banana, and then you rip me off tomorrow when I'm hungry and I need one of your extra bananas, well, I'm not going to be altruistic the next time. So in the public sphere, if we don't punish people who lie casually or support liars or promote disinformation or don't regulate vehicles like Facebook, which are vast machineries of misinformation, preying on many, many people in the most divisive ways possible. If we don't do that, we're in trouble. We're in deep trouble. Tell the truth and play fair.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And you said in one of your books, this is a quote from one of your books, you said, "We've armed a Stone Age brain with nuclear weapons." And it's true, the stakes are pretty high right now. And I couldn't agree more that if we're going to pull back from the brink here, we have to, at the very least, have an equal playing field for conversation, for good ideas to emerge. Like we need truth as like a fundamental value in order for those conversations to even take place.
Yeah.
So
that's right. And to me, it just becomes immediately, it needs to get foregrounded when truth is what's at stake. If truth-telling, it's not a particular truth that's at stake. It's when truth-telling altogether is at stake. That needs to be foregrounded and fought for.
Wonderful. Well, listen, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast. And finally, I guess, where can people find more about your work and connect with you?
Oh, thank you, Liam. This has been a pleasure. rickhanson.net, my website, chock full of freely offered resources, tons of talks, videos, slide sets. It's freely offered. You can also learn more about my online programs of different kinds, some of which are super bite-sized and easy. There's one I call Just 1 Minute, which is, like almost 60 little 1 minute, 2 minute or so practices of different kinds you can do. And then all the way out to these year-long, really deep dives in personal growth. So rickhanson.net.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure.
Ditto, Liam. Bows to you.